Okay, so I'll ask everybody to please mute their microphones when I'm speaking. So good morning, my name is Rick Ross, and I'm the chair of the Dangerous Dog Review Tribunal. The Tribunal Secretary has now confirmed that we have quorum, so I'll call meeting 11 of the DDRT to order. Welcome, everyone. The meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology, with members and staff connecting by video conference or telephone or attending in person at Toronto City Hall. While under previous circumstances, we would not be able to hold a virtual meeting of this tribunal, our first item of business today is to amend our procedures to permit members to participate electronically as authorized by recent amendments to the City of Toronto Act and by Toronto City Council. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public can observe the meeting on YouTube at the link youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. There are no registered speakers for this meeting. I would like to remind all staff to keep their microphones muted and their video turned off unless they need to address the tribunal. This will make it easier for those watching on YouTube and for me as chair to see the tribunal members as they participate in the meeting and vote on each item. Members, please keep your mics muted unless you are speaking, and please ensure your video is turned on at all times. As part of the agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. If necessary, I'll create a speakers list and call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting, I ask that members ensure that they turn on their video and raise their hand to indicate their voice. Members, I want to remind you that although you're participating remotely, you must still submit your motions in writing to the Tribunal Secretary. The clerk staff are available by email at ddrt@toronto.ca to help with motions. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Dangerous Dog Tribunal acknowledges the land we are meeting on as a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Abenaki, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and let me know. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our February 11th, 2020 meeting?
I make a motion to confirm those minutes.
Okay, so it's moved by Elisa. Do I have a seconder for the motion?
Yep, I'll second that.
Seconded by Randy Ewan. So that means the motion is passed. And we'll go to the first item. So we'll now proceed to consider the two items on the agenda. The first item is DG 11.1, enabling electronic hearings of the Dangerous Dog Review Committee. On this item, we're being asked to adopt changes to our procedures to permit electronic meetings and hearings, as well as some electronic hearing requirements and operational guidelines. Members, are there any questions of the procedural amendments or the requirements and guidelines? You will have received this previously to the meeting. See no questions. Are there any speakers to the item? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and unmute your mic to let me know. Seeing no speakers to the item, do I have a motion to adopt the item? Haley Goyout has moved to adopt the item. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Mr. Ewan seconds it. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so the motion is carried unanimously. So this moves us to the next item, which is item DG 11.2, education and training on electronic hearing operations. Members, city staff are prepared to give you a brief overview of how an electronic hearing will take place on WebEx. Is it the will of the tribunal to have such a demonstration? Seeing no one opposed, we will be able to proceed. Are there any speakers to the item? If you do wish to speak, you have to raise your hand or unmute your mic. Hearing no questions, do I have a motion to receive the item?
Rick, I'll motion to receive the item.
Secondary from Mr. Young.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, second by Ms. Chaplick. Okay, so at this point, I assume I can turn it over to staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Jennifer Forks from the City Clerk's office here. If you would just bear with us for one moment, we're getting ourselves organized on our end. Thank you. With apologies, Mr. Chair, we're having a few difficulties over on our end. If I might, could I ask you to ask the members to take a quick 5-minute recess and we'll get ourselves sorted on this end?
Okay, sure. So members, with respect to the recess, I would suggest that you leave your cameras on, but you do mute your microphone.
Okay, will do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could call the meeting back to order, we are mostly sorted out on our end, and I'm able to proceed with the presentation. Thank you, members, for your patience.
Okay, so I will now call the meeting back to order. I have been informed that we have to reopen item 1 to add an extra amendment.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. If you could go back to item 1 and ask the members for a motion to reopen the item, and then take the vote on that, and then to ask for a motion, and we'll display it, to amend item 1, further amend item 1, and then a vote on the item as amended. So it'll be a 3-part. First, a motion to reopen, then a motion to amend, and then a motion to adopt as amended.
Okay, right now I can't see the members because you've got the screen sharing up. Okay, thank you. So I need to have a motion to reopen item 1.
I'll make a motion to reopen item 1.
Okay, so Ms. Chaplet moves to reopen. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Second, Dr. Glayholt, all those in favor? Okay, so we've unanimously reopened item 1.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
now
Chair.
I think we need to know what the amendment.
Yes, we'll call the amendment
Yes.
up just in one moment.
So it appears we are adding a timeline to the ability to be electronic.
Mr. Chair, it's Jennifer Forks from the City Clerk's Office. If I could, I'm going to ask Scott from Legal Services to quickly speak to the additional amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk, and then through you, Mr. Chair. That's right. What the motion does is clarify the period during which electronic meetings can be held, and it clarifies that the period starts as of today and runs until a year after one of the respective periods of emergency has been lifted, which is in line with the authority from City Council.
Okay. So thank you for that rationale as to explaining why. So do we have any questions from the members?
I do. Mr. Chair, just curious whether I'm entitled to vote on the amendment if I didn't vote on the original motion.
I would, I guess, defer that question to
Perhaps
Legal
not from the
counsel.
office.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. This is Jennifer Forks from the City Clerk's Office. Yes, members in attendance at the meeting are able to vote on any amendments that are before them while they're in attendance.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions concerning the amendment to basically put a time limit on the ability to do electronic meetings? So seeing head shaking horizontally, I will assume we can now entertain a vote on this motion. So I will ask all those in favor of the amendment. Haley, Randy, Elisa, and Tracy, your hand is up? Okay, sorry, you were just blocked by some of the icons at the bottom. Okay, and I will also vote in favor, so I believe then the motion has passed unanimously. So does that mean we can now go on to item 2, which is the
Mr. Chair, it's Jennifer Forks
explanations.
from the City Clerk's Office, and we just require one more motion, that is to adopt the item as amended.
Oh, okay. So we've adopted the amendment, so now we need to adopt the item as amended. So we'll need the vote again on that. All those in favor?
Rick, I think if you need someone to, I believe Jennifer needs someone to motion, and I'll motion to adopt as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Randy, seconded by Elisa to adopt it as amended. All those in favor? Okay, see no one opposed. So therefore it passes unanimously. Okay, so can we now go on to the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you again, members, for allowing us to propose the technical amendments at the last moment there. So we're moving to DG 11.2, and it's this brief presentation on how the electronic hearings will operate. So I'm going to cover a few brief topics this morning on some of the pre-hearing preparations we've done in anticipation of electronic hearings, how various parties will be provided access to the electronic hearings, what we'll be doing with respect to timing hearings and preventing interruptions during a hearing, the process for closed session, displaying evidence, and then run through a couple of what-ifs that we had anticipated. But at that point, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about some of the what-ifs that maybe we haven't thought about at this point. So first, in anticipation of electronic hearings, what we've done on our side is prepare an electronic hearing guide, and we'll be able to provide that to all applicants prior to their hearings so that they are able to know in advance how the electronic hearing will work and what the expectations and the opportunities for their participation will be. In addition, we've provided some training for the members of the Dangerous Dog Review Tribunal on the features of the WebEx, which is the video conference platform that we'll be reusing for the electronic hearings. So for an electronic hearing, all parties will be provided with the video conference connection details 5 business days prior to the hearing. Interested persons as well will be provided with the video conference details upon their registration with the tribunal secretary. And during the period for which the tribunal is conducting electronic hearings, those hearings need to remain open to the public. And much like this meeting, we'll be live streaming those on our City Council website at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. What we'd like to do is, similar to when we conduct in-person hearings, is to assign a start time to each of the hearings. However, because of the nature of the electronic hearing, we want to probably space those out a little bit more so that we're allowing for some break between each hearing for the next set of hearing participants to be able to connect to the video conference and for us to be able to test their video and audio before each hearing commences. So what members you may experience is that your day may be a little bit longer if there are multiple hearings scheduled for the day, so that we can ensure that all parties are able to connect and participate to the best of their abilities with the technology that they have available to them. In order to prevent interruptions during a hearing, what we'll do is, in consultation with the chair at the time and the tribunal secretary, is once we know that everyone who is anticipated to be at a specific hearing is present and connected to the video conference, we will effectively lock the video conference to prevent any accidental interruptions. And essentially, by locking the video conference, the live stream will remain connected, so the electronic hearing will be still observable by any members of the public who wish to watch it. However, any other persons with the connection information will not be able to join, and as such, you will not experience anyone sort of popping up onto the screen or into the WebEx video conference who was not supposed to be in there at that time. Once we're ready to proceed with an individual hearing, each hearing will begin with the chair's review of hearing procedures. These will be modified to reflect a few of the operating guidelines that the tribunal has just adopted. So any given panel will begin by considering preliminary motions, including any requests to consider late submissions. And I'll speak a little bit about evidence in just a moment. Members of the parties and witnesses are able, as you are today, to control their own microphones in order to speak and ask questions. But as a result, we may need to ask the chair to prompt parties and witnesses to mute, or perhaps more frequently to mute or unmute themselves at the appropriate times. As you've been doing today, members will vote by a show of hands. This does make the assumption, though, that all members have their videos turned on. In the event that a member's video has been disconnected or turned off, the chair may have to ask the tribunal secretary to conduct an oral recorded vote. But again, the procedures that you've just adopted in the operating guidelines indicate that to the best of everyone's capacity, we're asking all members to participate by video and to have their videos turned on at all times. Now, what we're doing now is that we're conducting these meetings as an open session that is open and live streamed to the public and anyone is able to observe. However, if the panel needs to meet in closed session during a hearing for closed session deliberations, what we are able to do in the video conference platform is to place all other meeting participants, so this would be parties, city staff, witnesses, they will be moved out of the video conference and into what is known as the WebEx lobby, and then readmitted once the hearing is back in public session. So during a closed session, what we'll also do is that we'll shut down the live stream so that the deliberations are not being live streamed to the public. Effectively, what the WebEx lobby is it's like a waiting room. So once parties have joined the meeting, they will remain connected to the video conference, but they are unable to see or hear or interact with the meeting, so that we know that while we haven't disconnected anyone, and therefore once we go back into open session, we don't need to wait for them to reconnect, that they will automatically be moved back into the meeting room once we are back in open session. As the Dangerous Dog Review Tribunal considers quite a bit of evidence as part of its deliberations, there is the opportunity, if requested, for things to be, as we are doing now, to be displayed in the WebEx video conference platform so that you are able to see materials. So we'll continue with our usual practices of providing all materials in advance to the tribunal members. However, should there be a request by either the tribunal panel or by the parties that something be displayed for the consideration of the panel during the presentation of evidence by any of the parties, we're able to do that. However, the way we've set up the video conference is that the screen sharing function is restricted during the tribunal's electronic hearings. So parties themselves are unable to display materials or share their screens. However, because of the 14-day disclosure rules in the tribunal's rules of procedure, we at the city clerk side will have copies of all materials that have been submitted that parties wish to present to the tribunal and have the tribunal consider as part of its deliberations. And so the panel chair may at any time, or any member may, or party may at any time request the tribunal secretary to display some submissions from any party, including any late submissions that were accepted by the tribunal. So again, we'll be following the same procedures as usual, where disclosure is required 14 days in advance. However, parties are able to make preliminary motions to the tribunal to give consideration on whether or not the tribunal wishes to accept any late submissions. If the event that the tribunal does wish to consider those late materials, we will insist that they are provided to the clerk's office in PDF format so that we are able to circulate them to the members, as well as to display them inside the WebEx conference if necessary. So with that, a couple of what-ifs. The first one is, what if a member loses their connection to the hearing? So as with any of these video conferencing platforms, everyone's connections are somewhat reliant on the strength and availability of their own local internet providers, whether that's home Wi-Fi or hardwired into their own internet connections at work or other locations. But we do know that from time to time, technology may fail. And so if a member loses their connection to a hearing, the chair may call a brief recess to wait for those connections to be reestablished. We'll keep a constant eye on that email, ddrt@toronto.ca. And so members, if you do lose your connection to a hearing, Please get hold of us as soon as possible so that we can advise the chair that you've lost your connection and that we should be calling a recess to wait for you to be able to reconnect. However, if quorum is lost as a result of disconnections, the meeting will have to stand adjourned and all business will carry over to a future meeting. Much like the members, we are also unable to know at time of anyone hearing what the internet reliability of any party may be. And so if a party, that is either the applicant or the city, loses their video connection to the hearing, again, the chair may want to call a brief recess to wait for that connection to be reestablished. The reestablishing that connection is the responsibility of the parties or the witnesses. And if the connection is not reestablished in a reasonable amount of time, the panel may wish to consider, and it is up to the panel, to determine whether or not to adjourn the hearing to another date. And finally, as I mentioned before, we will be setting times, as we do for in-person hearings, for individual hearings. However, because we're locking the room to prevent unnecessary interruptions, we may find ourselves, the tribunal may find itself in a position where a hearing is running significantly over time and the parties to the next hearing may be waiting to join the video conference. In that participation guide that I mentioned before, parties will be advised that if they are waiting to join a video conference, they can check the YouTube stream to see whether or not the hearing previous to them is still going, and then be encouraged to contact us to advise that they are waiting to join. If we find ourselves, the tribunal finds itself in an overlap position, we may ask the chair to take a brief recess between hearings so that parties can be granted entry to the video conference, and then we can get all parties settled in and do their video and audio checks. What this does mean, members, is that, again, your days may get a little bit longer as we work to ensure that everyone is connected and ready to go before the hearing proceeds. So those are the what ifs that we came up with, but I'm sure you may have some questions for me, and I'm happy to take those at this time.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, so my question is, I know that you said, or correct me if I'm interpreting it wrong, that if there is a disconnection, then a person can always email DGRT and that will be monitored closely, and you guys can try and get us back, or one of the parties or whoever is disconnected back into the WebEx. But what I'm wondering is, if somebody's disconnected because their internet is down, they may not be able to email you. So I would hate for a party or someone who's interested to be disconnected and have no way of getting back in or getting in touch with anyone. So I'm wondering if there's also a phone number that could be provided in addition to the DGRT email address. So if people are disconnected, they could call a number that would be monitored to help them get back in.
Through the chair, thank you. That's an excellent suggestion. Yes, we can provide a generic phone number that for both yourselves as well as for parties and witnesses to reach out to advise us that they've been disconnected.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, I have a question as well.
Of course.
Okay. I was wondering if the city clerk, as the host of the WebEx meeting, has the ability to mute everyone manually while one person is speaking. So, for instance, during your presentation right now, would you have the ability to mute everyone while you give your presentation, just so there aren't interruptions? I mean, including members of the chair. If you could sort of, I find it difficult to, listen to if it was testimony or if it was a presentation. I find it difficult to listen when there's background noise. So I'm just wondering if that's possible, if the city could do that.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I've just I've done a quick check-in with some of our technical experts here on the city side, and yes, in the WebEx, there is the option for the WebEx host to do a global mute and then a selective unmute, so that we are, again, I would defer to the chair to make the request. We try not to interfere with the members' ability to control their own microphones, but at the request of the chair, we would be happy to do a global mute and then unmute the specific participant, whether it be a party or a witness or a member who's speaking.
Right. Or another suggestion would be if the city clerk as host can hear that one person's background noise is interrupting, if you could just mute that person, or I don't know, because people forget sometimes, and I understand that. I've forgotten too. So yeah.
Thank you for the suggestion. We'll, again, trying to be deferential to folks' control of their own microphones, but yes, should it appear that it is interfering with the proceedings, we will make an effort to step in if necessary. Mr. Chair, I cannot hear you at this moment, but I believe that you were trying to ask a question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you loud and clear now, sir.
Okay. So when we're in closed session, what shows on the live stream for if anybody from the public is watching? Will they know that it's just closed session, or might they think that the hearing is complete?
Mr. Chair, there will be a slide graphic that comes up on the live stream that says this meeting is in closed session.
Perfect.
Yeah, the screen does not go blank, and the YouTube stream actually appears to continue. So the time sequence continues, but it's been the actual video feed that goes to it has been cut, and then instead a slide graphic goes up that says this meeting is in closed session.
Okay.
Jennifer, just had a question for you.
Of course.
So, thank you. So for instance, I saw earlier that there was call-in users wanting to obviously observe the meeting. I'm just curious to know that once we go live with actual hearings and everything, would we see people that want to observe the hearings on this actual Cisco WebEx screen, or do they just literally view it on their own, web browser or tablet through YouTube?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, the only persons who will be provided with the connections to this an individual hearing will be the parties, the witnesses, and yourselves. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a number of initials, which are members of city staff, either from the clerk's office or from Municipal Licensing and Standards and Toronto Animal Services, who are observing. However, during a hearing, most of our staff, as well as who are not needed as part of the hearing, will be observing on YouTube, and any members of the public who just want to watch, including members of the media, are able to watch the proceedings as they unfold, but live streamed on YouTube, not from inside the WebEx itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was a one-off today, just given that it was a business meeting. That's why we saw, for example, call-in user 416. Et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct. During an actual hearing, the tribunal has just adopted rules to require that all meeting participants participate by video. The call-in option is there in the event that someone's video connection fails, but at that point, it's up to the tribunal to decide whether or not they want to proceed with a party or a witness who is not able to connect by video.
Thank you.
I have a question. Maybe this isn't the right forum for the question, and if it's not, then no problem. But I was wondering if I believe there were 2 hearings that got canceled, and I was wondering if they're going to be rescheduled during this calendar year or shortly thereafter on the WebEx platform.
Thank you for the question. At this time, we are looking at rescheduling dates in consultation with Municipal Licensing and Standards and your availability to determine how many hearings are needed over the next couple of months, and therefore to allocate our time accordingly. At this moment, because City Hall and also big buildings are closed to the public, we'll be continuing with the electronic hearings. Should there be a change in public health advice or city operations, we may be able to modify those expectations, but at this point we'll be proceeding with electronic hearings and looking to reschedule dates if there are applications waiting to be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, members. If there are no questions further at this point, I just encourage you to, again, reach out to myself or the other members of the City Clerk's team that support the tribunal if you have other questions or suggestions about the way the electronic hearings will unfold. Otherwise, I thank you very much for your time this morning. And Mr. Chair, I believe all we need now is a motion to receive the presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank
So
you, Jennifer.
we have completed the business. So I need a motion to end the meeting. Do I have such a motion? Ms. Chaplik has moved. Have a seconder?
I'll second.
Mr. Yuan has seconded. All those in favor? So I see all hands up, mine included. So the motion passes unanimously, and this meeting of the Dangerous Dog Review Tribunal has concluded. Motion to adjourn has been successfully passed. As I think was indicated earlier, there are